I was 7 years old the first time I saw him. Our family had just moved into the old house. It was the kind of house that looked ordinary on the outside. White siding, a sagging porch swing, a cracked driveway lined with weeds. But inside, it carried a weight that no amount of paint or furniture could hide. The air was heavy, the kind of heavy that clung to your chest. The floorboards complained with every step, like the house didn't want us there. My parents insisted it had character, that it was charming. But even at 7, I knew better. There was something wrong with that house. My bedroom was at the very end of the upstairs hallway, a small square room with a single window overlooking the yard. At first, I liked it. The window faced a massive oak tree, its branches stretching out like arms, swaying in the wind. The toy chest my dad had built for me sat neatly at the foot of the bed, packed with dolls, action figures, and comic books. It should have been a dream room for a kid. But then there was the closet. It wasn't a normal closet. It was deep, too deep. When you opened the door, the darkness seemed to stretch farther than the dimensions of the room allowed. The shadows didn't retreat even when the hallway light spilled in. They just crouched there, stubborn and thick, like something alive. I told my mom once that the closet felt too dark, but she only smiled and told me every kid gets scared of closets. That first night, I learned she was wrong. It was raining, and I remember lying in bed, the patter of raindrops against the window soothing me toward sleep. Then I heard it, the sound of wood creaking. My toy chest. I sat up, blinking in the dim glow from the streetlight outside. The chest was still shut tight. That's when my eyes drifted toward the closet. The door was open. I didn't remember leaving it that way. My stomach knotted as I stared at the sliver of blackness yawning open. At first, I thought it was just the shadows playing tricks, but then I saw him. He was tall, unnaturally tall, hunched slightly as though the ceiling pressed down on him. His arms were too long, his fingers curling around the closet door frame. His face was pale, stretched, and wrong, like a mask that didn't quite fit. His eyes gleamed faintly in the dark, glassy and wet, reflecting the little light in the room. He didn't step out. He just stood there, half hidden in the shadows, watching me. I couldn't scream, couldn't move. My body refused to obey me. Finally, I pulled the blanket over my head, my heart hammering against my ribs so hard I thought it would break them. Minutes crawled by like hours. At last, I peeked again. The closet door was shut. The next morning, I told my parents. They dismissed it instantly. "You had a nightmare," my father said, ruffling my hair. "Too much TV before bed," my mom added. But I knew better. It hadn't been a dream. And it wasn't the last time. The man came back. Sometimes I'd wake in the night to the sound of the closet door creaking open, the old hinges groaning as though they were straining under an invisible hand. Other times, he'd already be there, standing still, waiting, his head tilted slightly to the side as though studying me. And sometimes, he whispered. The whispers were faint, raspy, like leaves dragging across pavement. I couldn't make out the words, but I could feel them. They slithered into my ears and coiled in my chest. When I pressed my hands against my ears, the sound only grew louder, as if it came from inside my head. I begged my parents to let me keep a night light, but they insisted I was too old for it. My father said I was feeding my imagination. My mother said the dark would help me grow out of my fears. They took away the one small comfort I had, and the dark grew stronger. One night, I woke to find the toy chest open. Every toy I owned had been pulled out and arranged carefully around my bed in a circle. My dolls sat upright, their glassy eyes fixed on me, their painted smiles cruel in the faint light. Action figures were propped against the walls, their tiny arms pointed toward the closet. The closet door was wide open, and in the center of the blackness, I saw him again. This time he wasn't standing. He was crouched low, his long fingers pressed flat against the floor, his body coiled as if ready to crawl toward me. His head tilted so far it looked broken, his eyes gleaming with a hunger I couldn't describe. I screamed. My parents burst into the room moments later, furious. They found me sobbing in the middle of the toy circle. My father accused me of throwing a tantrum, of pulling out every toy to frighten myself. My mother shook her head. muttering about an overactive imagination. But I knew the truth. He had done it. The man in the closet was real, and he wanted me. After that night, I stopped sleeping. I would lie awake, staring at the closet door, waiting. The more I watched, the more I realized the door never stayed closed. Even if I latched it, even if I pushed a chair in front of it, by morning it would be open again. Sometimes just a crack, sometimes wide, like a mouth stretching into a scream. I started hearing him even when I wasn't in the bedroom. His whispers would follow me down the hallway. I'd catch glimpses of him in reflections, in the bathroom mirror, in the dark glass of the TV, in the window at night. Always in the same position. Standing, watching, waiting. I tried to tell myself it was my imagination. But then... When I was 10, we moved into a new house. It was bigger than the last one. Bright walls, larger rooms, a backyard with trees that swayed in the wind. My mom had remarried, and for the first time, it felt like our family was whole again. My stepdad laughed a lot, and my younger brother was born soon after. I wanted to believe things were better. I wanted to believe that the shadows of the old house had been left behind. But evil doesn't stay behind. My new bedroom was at the end of the hallway upstairs. It had 2 wide windows that faced the backyard and let in pale slants of moonlight at night. The closet, though, it was different. Taller, deeper, a kind of hollow black pit that seemed to stretch farther than the architecture of the house allowed. The first night, I woke to the faintest sound of shuffling inside. Not loud, just soft, like fabric brushing together. At first, I told myself it was my imagination, the way I had learned to lie to myself in the old house. But then I saw it. The door moved. Not much, just a slight shiver, as though someone pressed lightly against it from the inside. I lay frozen in bed, my eyes locked on the closet, my skin cold. My chest rose and fell in shallow breaths. The seconds dragged on until I finally fell asleep from exhaustion. In the morning, the door was cracked open. The nights grew worse. I started hearing tapping on my window, a rhythmic click, 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 like fingernails tapping glass. At first, I thought it was branches. But when I pulled the curtain back, there were no branches near enough to touch. The tapping continued, night after night. Sometimes soft, sometimes urgent, fast, insistent. And then, one night, I saw it. A pale hand, pressed flat against the window glass. The fingers were long, impossibly long, and they stayed there, unmoving. Slowly, the hand slid down the pane, leaving no print, no fog, nothing but the sick certainty that something was out there. And we were on the 2nd floor. There was no way anyone could reach my window without a ladder. But she could. A month later, my little brother, barely 4 years old, started talking about her. He called her the White Lady. He said she came into his room at night and sat on the edge of his bed. He said she whispered to him. When my mom laughed and brushed it off as imagination, I froze. I believed him, because I had seen her too. The first time she appeared to me was in a dream. She stood in the corner of my room, impossibly tall, her head nearly grazing the ceiling. Her dress was long and white, like something from another century, but it didn't rest on the floor. It floated, swaying even though the air was still. Her hair was long, black, and stringy, plastered against her face as though she had just risen from water. Her skin was pale, like chalk, but her eyes were black. Not dark, not shadowed, just empty, black voids. She whispered my name. Her voice was dry, brittle, like leaves scraping across pavement. When I woke, I swore I could still hear it. It was during a storm when she finally came. The rain lashed against the windows, the wind rattled the siding, and thunder shook the house. I woke to the sound of my window creaking. The lock turned by itself. The window slid open, inch by inch, though the storm outside should have forced it shut. And then she climbed in. Her body didn't move like a person's. She floated, her bare feet never touching the floor, her arms dangling at her sides as she drifted toward my bed. Her face hovered above mine. Her breath was cold, so cold that frost seemed to form inside my lungs. She whispered my name again. I screamed. My mom and stepdad rushed in, the lights snapping on. but the window was closed. Locked. My room was empty. They yelled at me for scaring everyone, for screaming like a child. But I saw the look in their eyes. They were shaken too, and I knew they didn't sleep that night. After that, things only got worse. The white lady became a constant presence. Some nights, I saw her in my dreams, standing in the corner, her hair swaying in non-existent wind. Some nights, I'd wake to find my closet door wide open, the sound of her whisper curling through the dark. My mom took me to therapy. She told the doctor I had night terrors, that I was overly imaginative. I tried to tell him the truth, but he smiled and nodded and wrote notes I wasn't allowed to see. But how do you explain to someone that what you're seeing isn't in your head? That it's real? You can't. And so I kept it to myself. One night, my brother screamed. I ran into his room and found him curled under the blanket, sobbing. He whispered that she had been standing by the door, watching him, her black eyes fixed on his bed. He said she told him she wanted to stay. After that, he stopped talking about her. But I knew it wasn't because she stopped coming. It was because he was too scared to admit she was real. The worst night of my life came during another storm. Lightning split the sky, thunder rattled the house, and I lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling. Then I heard it, the slow creak of my closet door. I turned my head. It was wide open, and she was standing inside. Her dress swayed, her arms dangled, her eyes glowed black. She stepped out. No, floated out, and drifted toward me. My body froze, my chest locked, my throat closed. She leaned over me, her face inches from mine, and whispered my name one last time. Then, darkness. The next thing I remember was screaming, my parents bursting into the room, the lights flooding in. The closet was closed. The window was locked, and I was alone, but I knew she was still there, waiting. I didn't see him until I was a teenager. By then, I had convinced myself that the things from my childhood were just memories twisted by fear, nightmares that had bled into waking life. I told myself that the white lady, the whispers in the dark, the shadows that moved when they shouldn't, all of it was just imagination. But then I met him, and imagination wasn't enough to explain what I saw. It was summer. I was 15, lying awake in bed with the fan humming in the corner. My window was cracked open, letting in the warm night air. The streetlight outside cast a pale glow through the curtains, and everything seemed quiet. I closed my eyes, and then I couldn't move. At first, I thought it was a dream. My body was frozen, my chest tight, my breath shallow. My eyes darted around the room, but I couldn't lift my arms, couldn't scream, couldn't even turn my head. That's when I saw him. He stood in the corner. Tall. Too tall. His shoulders were wide, his body perfectly still. He wore a long black coat that draped down to the floor, and on his head was a wide-brimmed hat, the kind you'd see in old movies. His face, if he had one, was swallowed by shadow, but I felt his eyes on me. They burned into my skull, heavy, suffocating, like a weight pressing down on my chest. He didn't move, didn't breathe, just stood there, watching. And then he smiled. I couldn't see his teeth, couldn't see his lips, but I felt the smile in my bones. Cold, cruel, endless. The moment broke when I gasped awake, able to move again. The corner was empty, but I knew what I had seen. The Hat Man didn't come every night, but when he did, I knew it before I even opened my eyes. I'd feel it, the heaviness, the weight pressing down on me. My chest would tighten, my body would lock, and I'd know he was there. Sometimes he stood in the corner. Sometimes he stood by the window. Once, he was at the foot of my bed, so close I could see the edges of his coat ripple in the dark, even though the air was still. And once, he leaned down. His hat brim cast a shadow over my face, so close I could smell the stench of burning, like smoke, like ash, like something long dead. And in the silence of my paralysis, I heard him whisper, not my name, not words I could understand, just a low, rumbling sound, like the growl of an animal too big to exist. I thought I was losing my mind. But then, one night at a friend's house, we stayed up late, talking about horror movies, laughing, joking, daring each other to share ghost stories. And he said it. "Do you guys ever see the man in the hat?" The room went silent. He described him exactly. The tall figure, the long coat, the wide-brimmed hat. The way he stood in the corner and stared. My stomach dropped. It wasn't just me. And when I looked it up, when I searched late at night, my hands shaking on the keyboard, I realized people all over the world had seen him. Some called him a shadow person. Some said he was a demon. Some said he was older than humanity itself, a watcher, a collector. But everyone agreed on one thing. He comes when you're helpless. I'll never forget the night he touched me. I woke in the middle of the night, my body frozen. My chest screamed for air. I tried to move, but the paralysis held me like chains. He was there, at the side of my bed, leaning over me. His shadow swallowed the room, his hat brim cutting across my vision. I tried to scream, tried to cry, but my throat locked. And then his hand, if you can call it a hand, pressed against my chest. It was ice, but deeper than cold. It felt like the air had been sucked out of my lungs, like my soul was being pulled through my ribs. My vision blurred, my ears rang, my heart slammed against my chest so hard I thought it would burst. And then, black. I woke hours later, drenched in sweat, gasping for air. There was a mark on my chest. Not a bruise, not a scratch, just a shadowed imprint of long, skeletal fingers that faded by morning. He doesn't come every night anymore, but the fear remains, because once you see him, you never really stop. Sometimes I catch him in reflections, in the glass of my window, in the dark of a turned-off TV screen. Sometimes, when I wake up gasping in the night, I swear I see the brim of his hat in the corner of the room. And sometimes, when I'm walking outside at night, I feel him behind me. Not close, not chasing, just watching, always watching. The last time he came was different. I was older, living alone, convinced I had escaped him. But sleep paralysis returned, dragging me back into that frozen nightmare. And there he was, tall, still, waiting. But this time he spoke. A whisper, low and crackling, like fire eating through dry wood. I didn't understand the words, but I understood the meaning. It wasn't a visit. It was a promise. He would come again.